Hey, I'm Coach Mickey, and I'm so glad that you've joined us. And if this is your first time joining us, come on in and make yourself comfortable. For those of you that join us on a regular basis, I'm so glad that you do. And today I am really honored and excited to have this guest on. For those of you who listen to my podcast on a regular basis, you know I love having on guests that are historians, people that have written stories, have researched and done a lot of things that is important to not only our country but our past, and also just some insight on things that have happened throughout time. And when I saw this gentleman's information, I was really happy that he would agree to come on my podcast. So I'm just going to give you a quick uh, introduction to who he is, because I think him telling the story will be a lot more insightful and have a lot more meaning than for me just to read off of his bio. So I want to thank you so much for being with me today, Mr. John Brinks. How are you?
I'm doing well, Nikki. I hope you're doing well. Where are you from? Where are you speaking from?
Right now, I'm in California.
Okay,
In
and
California.
I'm in Prince George, British Columbia. And for those guests watching us from around the world, that is 500 miles north of Vancouver.
Oh, nice. Vancouver's a beautiful area. I've had an opportunity to visit some parts of Canada, and so I know that Canada means a lot to you from some of the information that I have read about you, and also, why you're in Canada. But can we start right off with your story, Mr. Brinks? I mean, you really have an extraordinary story that I think needs to be told. So would you mind sharing that with us?
I will do that, Nikki. You call me John,
Okay.
so anyway, for everybody watching, I was born November the 1st, 1940. So last week I had a birthday, man. I'm 83 years old. And I was, as I said, born in November of 1940 and in a town called Sappemeer, Sappemeer, in the northeastern part of Holland, with about 20 minutes from the border with Germany and about 15 minutes north to the canal that links to the North Sea. So my dad and my mom were married in 1938 and had a beautiful, were in love, and obviously he had a career, and they had a house, and fairly quickly had two children. My sister, 1 year older than me, and a brother, 2 years older than me, and the world was perfect and it was beautiful. And then overnight, everything changed, because that's when the German army, with the Blitzkrieg, and invaded Holland and Belgium and Luxembourg, and everything would change from that point forward. So, as I said, I was born November the 1st, so I remember still from the time that I was about 3.5, 4 years old, and it was at the time that obviously the Allied forces landed in Normandy in the summer of 1943 and pushed their way through Europe to liberate, especially the countries under occupation with the Germans. And at the same time, what was happening, bombers would fly overhead, first daytime, and then in 1943, daytime and nighttime. So I still remember from that point, even for me, that hundreds of bombers in the air is a sound that cannot really be expressed, but is an unbelievable sound. And what we would do as a family, my mother would go outside on the flat roof behind our upstairs bedrooms and watch, because it was not so much looking, but it was safer to be outside than inside. In the distance, we could see the Germans cities like Bremen, like Emden, and all those that were on the sea and had assets that were important for the war, that were being bombed. And numerous planes that came back had either been shot or had damage. And so it was a scary, scary time. The other part that I remember is that the winter 1944, 1945 was called the Hunger Winter. It was extremely cold, that on the record, colder than it ever had been before. And obviously the German army, in order to put leverage on the Dutch in particularly in those regions that we were in, did not supply any more food. So every morning, what we would do is go out, my brother, my sister, myself, with gunny sacks when I was between 4 and 5, into the railroad yards and find anything that was edible or burnable. And still today, I still remember the feeling of hunger that is still very much with me. And at the same time, it was so cold, a lot of people that were vulnerable, the older ones and the younger ones, died during that winter. And I still can feel the cold, and sitting around a small room that we were heating, to stay warm, and still feel that feeling. And then the other part that you never forget is that all the families had the same issues. All the things that were happening with no food, the anxiety by my mother, we could feel it, that stayed with me actually, and even still to today, PTSD, and then the feeling of the inner child. And in fact, I got counseling for that well into my 50s. Very emotional, actually, reconciling that little boy from those years. So, and then what happened is that we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. And the Canadians came in and pushed out the Germans that were getting closer and closer to their homelands, and were trying to get back, that they had nothing left, and were blowing up other bridges behind them to slow down the occupied forces, in this case, the Canadians, to slow them down. And a lot happened then, in terms, people were shot, and we would see that. We saw far too much that we should not have seen. And then I remember also that when the Canadians came in, and they were stationed, a small section of the Canadian Army was based behind our house. And every morning at daybreak, the kids would go into the schoolyard and to get from them bread with butter and cheese. They had never seen anything like it. And, they fed us and gave us chocolates and all of those kind of things. And it then got, for me, it became the dream that not if, but when I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. So it was a difficult time. And especially if you think about it, around the world now, where, looking at the Ukraine, and then the Middle East, and those kind of places where there are wars, that a lot of people have the impression that once the war is over, everything goes back to normal. Well, it isn't, because some of the things that were then, like the families that were together, like with my dad that had been gone during the whole period of the war, the last time they heard from him was in the bombing of Rotterdam, where thousands of people had died. We did not know as a family if he was dead or alive. And, and he finally came back early after the Canadians liberated our area, and even their relationship and all the things that we had taken for granted would take years and years before things kind of fell back into place somewhat, but some things never changed, and it still affected the people, and especially the young people, for years and generations in some cases. So it took me till I was 24, when I was going to initially go to Canada when I was 17, excuse me, but my parents wouldn't let me. And then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force. And then finally, I decided to go when I was 24. And I emigrated to Canada, and I had the dream to go to Canada. The second dream was to build a lumber mill and to go to British Columbia. And so that's what I did. And I arrived in Vancouver by train, flew into Montreal actually, arrived by train in July of 1965 with nothing. I had a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. But with the dream of building a lumber mill. So talked to a German fellow that worked in the immigration office here in Canada, and I told him what I wanted to do. He said, go to Prince George. And that's what I referred to earlier, 500 miles north of Vancouver. And that's where I went, 12 hours with the bus, came off the bus with my suitcase, my 3 books, my 2 sets of clothes, and then started to build first a career as a cleanup man, then became a lumber pilot, and then gradually, within a couple of years, was a superintendent, and very quickly started working towards building a lumber company, which I now have, and there's a number of different companies, and yeah, so that's kind of in the capsule, my background. But the story, and now in particular, is that to take, let's not take for granted as to what we have in North America, how lucky we are. And sometimes, especially in the next week or so, and I have for the last 12 years, I go to different schools and talk to usually 2, 3, 4 different schools every year, and talk about why the 2 minutes of silence, and to should we, especially as young people, appreciate what we have, and especially when we watch TV and see all the things going on around the world, how lucky we are here, and that war is very, very destructive, in particular to young people, and how fortunate we are to live here. And at the same time, how proactive we need to be, and sharing with people, for those that were there and know what it means, to share that with others, is very, very important.
Wow. Well, your story is extraordinary. It really is. It tells me a lot, not only about you, but also with humanity, how much we have got to be able to look at things and have a goal and a direction. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to back up, because the first thing that went through my mind is, well, first of all, I could not even imagine what it'd be like to go through a war zone as a small child, and also deal with the hunger and the cold and not knowing, and all of the things that are so unpredictable during that time frame. I mean, just the amount of fear had to be very difficult. However, I want to, what got to me and I've heard the most is how much you were so determined to be able to move forward in your life, even with everything that happened. And I think what happens a lot of times is people deal with certain situations and they don't know how to get out of it. They don't understand. Yours is so extraordinary and so difficult. I have to ask, when you went, with the Canadian soldiers, and you got the cheese and the bread and you made that choice to go, I'm going to move to Canada. From that day forward, what was your mindset? I mean, because you had, like you said, you had to go through therapy for a lot of the things that you saw, and the things that you had to go through, but there had to be one driving force that just kept you going every single day. What was that?
So from that point forward, when we were liberated by the Canadians, I knew I would go to Canada, the land of my heroes. There was no question in my mind. I felt like a Canadian. So the other part, and to your question, is that I was not very successful academically. I failed grade 3, and I failed grade 7 3 times. And so I was then getting to the point that, and my parents were beautiful people and cared much about me. But then it became a question after the failing the 3rd time. I was 14. What are we going to do with John? Maybe we have to send him to a school of the mentally challenged, or should we get him a career or a job, or train him in a trade? So they fortunately chose to put me into a trade. So they found me a job on the furniture factory because my grandfather was also a furniture maker. I saw his pieces. He died very young, so I never knew him, but I knew him through all the work that he did and the beautiful structures that he manufactured, and especially in churches and all of those kind of things. My dad managed a small lumber company, and so lumber to me was very, very important in my life. And so then at nights I would go to become a furniture maker in college and gradually work my way through that from the time that I was 14. Now, the other part about it is that, that the kids that I grew up with, that I went to school with, they went on to college and then university. And I became at 14 a laborer. Now I'm proud of that today, but then it was not looked at. It made you a bit of an outcast, and and obviously you were not bright enough to finish school, and people can be cruel, especially young people sometimes, and So in any event, the so I then was at 14, worked in the furniture factory, then started working in a larger force company, was already quite successful, actually, at a young age. Then at 17 or 18, I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force, and I wanted to be a pilot. Now, the draft then was mandatory, not today anymore, but then it was. And I was in the Dutch Air Force for 30 months, in special forces, actually. And that was good experience. And then when I came out, when I was 21, I spent another 3 years working in the force company, and then decided that I would go. My dream was to go to Canada. My second dream was to build my own lumber company. And then the other part that I had that I was always an optimist, even considering that I was not successful academically, and a lot of friends were, that I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And so I wanted to leave, and I would leave, and I wanted to take nothing with me other than a suitcase, two sets of clothes, and then 3 books. And that's how I went to Canada. And I knew the timber and the lumber is in British Columbia. And so, as I said earlier, then I talked to the immigration department. They said, go to Prince George, 500 miles north of Vancouver. That's where all the opportunities are. So when I came off the bus here, the Greyhound, in July of 1965, couldn't speak the language, didn't know soul, didn't have a job. And I'm going to show you something. My employees made that for me. Is I had in my pocket $25.47. But even more importantly to me, what is my foundation attitude, I always look at the bright side. If today is a bad day, I'll swear it's going to be sunshine tomorrow, a good day. The other part is finding my passion, give it all that I got, no matter what I do, and work ethic. I work harder than anybody, but will follow. But will follow is success. So that's kind of how I started. And then started as a cleaner man, lumber pilot, and then already within 2 years, I had part ownership in a small lumber mill in the Yukon Territory. Where is the Yukon Territory? Well, that Prince George is in the center of British Columbia. It's a big province. It's about 1,000 miles long. It is just next to Alaska and at the very northern part of British Columbia. And so I was there for 5 years, was managing a small lumber company with the option of buying a part. Then I started over again and came to Prince George, and then started out another lumber company, the Brink group of companies. I still have that today. It's about 10 different companies, and is doing quite well. And so the other part that I had is that I still did not feel, even then, people talk to me and say, oh, you're so successful. And I didn't feel that way. Even not then, I still felt that I had failed and in my own feeling. And it was not until something happened that triggered me into a different direction. And I was not overly good at communicating. And if there were more than 3 or 4 people in a circle, then I was not very good usually in interacting. And by pure coincidence, my ex-sister-in-law dragged me to an organization called Toastmasters. And so I said, "What are you going to do there?" They said, "Well, you just sit down, you listen, and you will like it." I said, "Are you going to ask me any questions?" He said, "No, no, 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 don't worry about it." So I was halfway through the meeting, and then somebody said, "Hey, John, tell us a little bit about you." I said, "Oh my God, I'll never come back here." So anyway, I did. I stayed there for 10 years and I became a distinguished Toastmaster. That is the highest level in Toastmasters. And obviously what it did, it gave me confidence and the ability to communicate. And then the other part that you may find interesting is that people started saying to me, "Why don't you write a book? You have done so many things so interesting." And so I thought about it, and for about 20 years I started the book, stopped the book, started the book, stopped the book. And then I knew, now I'm 83, so about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, if I don't do it now, it will never happen. Just gonna have a thank you.
Yeah, no, please do.
So I started writing a book, and the book is Against All Odds. And it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. Now, amazingly, Nikki, I'm a good writer and I'm very good at numbers. And so I wrote this. It's not hurrah, hurrah, John, how successful he is. It's not about that. It's about all the ups and downs and going through all of those things. So that kind of gave me the encouragement to do that. I also became a public speaker. And then the other part that I did is that in 1997, January 1997, I walked into a store here, a bookstore, and for some reason or another, I opened a book. I just still don't know why I did that. And the book's title was Driven to Distraction. What's it about, John? ADHD. And I said, "Oh my God, that's me." So I bought the book. This is actually the actual book I bought in January 1997.
Wow.
And I wrote on the inside in Dutch, "Now I finally know who I am." And so that kind of explained some of the things that had happened to me in the past. So then the more I found out, I was ashamed of it because there was stigma attached, and I'm building companies. What am I going to do? Go to the bank, make a proposal for money. And then I said, "Oh, by the way, I should tell you, I also have a mental disorder called ADHD." And they would say, "Have a nice day. No money for you." Obviously, that has changed now to a certain extent. And so I read up about it more and more and more. So that was 1997. It took me 5 years before I walked into my doc's office, who was a friend, had delivered both our daughters. And, and he said to me, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we checked it out, and he said, "Yeah, you have ADHD. No question about that." So even then, for a long time, I didn't really talk about it until about 5 years ago. I started to talk about it more. It's a superpower. And so the more I communicated about it, and I wrote a book about it. And the title of the book is ADHD Unlocked. And it's about, from an ADHD person's perspective, I wrote it in such a way that you can start the book anywhere and write forward or backwards, and it all will kind of make sense.
I
And
love it.
so, and so the book is not only for those that are affected by ADHD, but also by slow learners in different areas. And so the other part that I found, Nikki, is that the frequency of occurrence is thought to be about 8%. I believe it's well over 20. And in fact, what I'm saying now is that in your circle to any individuals, and including our listeners, is that you will have somebody affected or benefited, in my mind, of ADHD, either in your family, your circle of friends, or the place you work. You cannot avoid it to interact with them. So the better read the book, because the better you understand how they work, they are somewhat different, but uniquely. And to those that know that they have it, they are blessed, because I believe it's a superpower. And so those things in combination, then, so now today I have the confidence that I had the ability as well, the thing that I looked for when I left Holland, that I wanted to prove to myself that I have the ability, and that even already being successful, still did not have that feeling until I added to a Toastmasters, and then becoming an author, obviously, and a public speaker, where now I speak on the topics, not only those, but also entrepreneurship and confidence and other things. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention to you, I find that a lot of people don't know what they want to do, and they say, "But what do you want to do for the career?" I don't know, what and I say, and even the people that have careers, I heard something on the United States main channels. I forget now, CNN or one of those guys. Anyway, they said that up to 70% of the people that work don't like their jobs. And of the 70% that don't like the job, 75% are looking for other jobs. So already before that, I find that talking about passion so important in terms of liking what you do. So I wrote another book here, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And then a fair question would be in saying, okay, John, are you living the dream? I am, even after all this time, going through all the ups and downs. I usually get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always think I'm late. And I always make my bed. And so, and then all kinds of challenges happen, but I always look at the positive side: attitude, passion, work ethic. And so, so that's kind of what I do. And, and then I'm writing another book that you may find interesting, is Living Young, Dying Old. And again, is something that one will come out next July. And what it is not just age, but it's quality of life, and all the elements that are involved, especially look at being proactive on the non-traditional medicines, not just give chemicals of some sort or another to depress what the issues are, rather work on the foundation, health, exercise, and all those other elements, which I think are very, very important.
Wow. Well, first of all, I want to back up, and I have to ask, because you have written quite a few books. Like you said, it took you a while to do the first one, and now you're taking everything that you have and what you've experienced, and you're using that and sharing that knowledge with everyone. But I got to ask you, you've mentioned multiple times that you had 3 books in your suitcase with 2 other changes of clothes. What were the books that you had? What were the 3 books that you brought with you?
Very, very good question. And it shows you it was Management by Drucker in Dutch, and Logical Thinking, also in Dutch, American publication. And then the other one is Canada History, and in particular in regards to the federal government and the provinces, to better understand Canada. But Management by Drucker, in particular, and Logical Thinking became also, to me, the foundation. So those books and this one, Driven to Distraction, became very, very important in my life. And this one, I nearly wore it out, as you can see. It's,
Yeah.
and it is January 1997. Now, the interesting part, I have to tell you this, Nikki, is that it was written by Edmund Hollowell, medical doctor, that wrote the book. And a number of other books that he did. I'm podcasting him this afternoon.
I love it. That is awesome. That is amazing. Well, first of all, the 3 books that you brought tells me how determined you were. I mean, to be able to have those were the 3 books that you picked, which was management, and then also the critical thinking, and then also, knowing about the place that you're moving into. And you were what, 17? You said when you went to Canada, were you 17? Did I hear?
24.
Excuse me?
24.
24.
17 when I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force.
Got it.
And 24 when I left for Canada. Yeah.
But even though, John, you're talking about being a 24, my son is 22. So, and I look at what what drives you to do things in your life, like what becomes so important that you take that information and you use it to launch you forward with what you really, really want. And like you said, your passion and then your work ethic, putting those two together, are always an incredible connection for success. I think you cannot have success without the two of those, because when you are passionate about something, you never see obstacles. You can always
Right.
move forward and beyond them. And
Right.
and what you've been through and for what you've done and what you've seen and where you came from and then to get on to where you're going, to have those two things in your pocket, for lack of better words, really, and again, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Were those the two driving factors that brought you to where you are today? Because coming from something so devastating from your past and still being able to move beyond that and move forward and become a success, not for other people, but for yourself. Um, I mean, when like I guess I keep going back to getting on that train, from where you leaving Holland and coming into another country and having $25 in your pocket and not knowing anyone, but the having the passion to say, I'm doing this regardless of the obstacles.
Right.
That takes a huge driving force. And I guess I just want to ask, when you were sitting on the train coming here, what was going through your mind? I mean, what did you think? What did you feel when you were on that train coming here to you're going to Canada?
Yeah, 4 days, 5 nights, long train ride. And the train is going slow. Sometimes I felt like walking alongside of it because I knew it go very fast, right? So, and then the other part that I didn't have much money because I left Amsterdam with $150 and I was not going to take another nickel. And I was going to come back either in a box or otherwise successful in my mind. And, so when I was sitting in the train and had all the time to think about it, is that I couldn't even understand the menu because I couldn't speak English. And so all I did is I knew toast. So I ate toast for 4 days, 5 nights.
Oh
And
my gosh.
and so I was very careful with the money that I had left over. So by the time I got to Prince George, I had the $25.47. Couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, and didn't have a job. But I knew that I could do it. And and probably what complemented it as well, Nikki, and I say that in my presentations more and more so, that what drove me is likely indirectly without knowing it is ADHD. That when I failed grade 7 for the third time and became a laborer and was kind of looked down on by many, and I knew I could do it. I knew I had it, but I had to remove myself because in Holland, the way it goes is that you want to get a job, you get married, you want to buy a house, you want to have a good career. So you try to get a good job. And then the first thing they ask you is, okay, show me your diplomas. Well, I had no diplomas. So I had to start all over new again, I felt. And I would do that with the dream that I had to go to Canada, the land of my heroes. I already worked in the forest industry. I was very good at what I was doing. I had hands-on experience and I was ready to work hard, and I have boundless energy still today at 83. So and be still building the company and growing the company, double in size in the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And so that's what I did. And there was no question in my mind. I would stay the course, and never give up.
Yeah, and I agree with you because a lot of times we see obstacles, but when we have the drive and the passion, you just blow right through them. You just don't see them because there is no other option. Failure is not an option, and you know that in your heart. You know that with every fiber of your being that you're going to do something, and nothing is going to get in the way. Regardless, like you said, you had no diploma. You came here, you didn't speak the language, and you built this company of what you knew what to do, and you took that and used that as your tool to move you forward and get you to where you needed to be. And that is, see, I love stories like what you're telling because a lot of times people go, "Oh, I can," or whatever, and it's like, no, is it you can't or you won't? That's always my question.
Exactly.
And I think that if you really decide of something that you really want, regardless of where you came from, what's happened, what's transpired, what you know, what you have, whether you have a degree or not, anything is possible. I mean, anything is possible.
And that's exactly what I'm saying, Nikki. Nothing is impossible. Stay the course. Don't give up. The other part that I did already from a young age, I listened to speakers that even then, when I was still in Holland and still unsure, I listened to people that gave presentations, either physically or in person, and listened to them and trying to figure out as to what made them click. And they had similar strength and issues that and determination and becoming understanding, logical thinking, all those things and those elements together would make them successful. But the most critical one of all is never give up. I remember doing a presentation with a group of people for a number of young persons, actually students, and and I was part of the panel. And this one fellow said, that the problem right now is banking because and saying, okay, what happened? He said, well, I made a proposal, was a good proposal, and they turned me down. And I said, okay, what happened then? Well, Mr. Banks, there's no way you can succeed. So I said, let me say this, that when I made a business plan in 1975, fairly extensive. Actually, we still have it and we still use it for all intents and purposes. I took it to every single bank in the area here, about a dozen of them. Most of them turned me down right away, but one or two kind of were interested in a way. So, and I would modify the proposal that I was making for my first company. Now, the problem was an obvious one now, that I had good ideas, but I had no equity. I had no money, and I wanted $25,000 to start a company. And so at last there was one bank left over, and I had gone to them about a dozen times and modified I didn't want to be a pain to them. I kept modifying the proposal, and then I still remember it like yesterday, about 6 booths away from us, where I was talking to the bank fellow that was handling my file, was the manager. And so he said, okay, so I told him again what I had done. And then, I was sitting there waiting for him. He said, let me talk to the manager again. So he went over to the manager. I could hear him all the way 6 booths away. He said, give him the money, give him the money. So that's what so I say that was the difference, where the one fella had concluded that there was no way he could get the money. He gave up then. I said, don't, because you have to stay the course. You work with this system, and it has to make sense. And then you start working on it. Never give up. Everything is possible.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. While you were saying this, I had seen this picture and it always sticks out in my mind every time I try to do something and it's like, okay, that didn't work. That didn't work. And it's a picture of a dandelion that has come up through the concrete. And I always think something so fragile and so delicate came through something so rigid and hard with no sunlight and still persisted to be able to reach the sunlight. And
Amazing.
Yeah, and I always think of that too. It's like you just have to keep going. Do not allow things to become that obstacle. And you're right. It's just never giving up is got to be the key. You have been an amazing guest, John. I could sit and talk to you for hours because I love everything you're about and what you do. And as my circle of friends know, all your information and your books are going to be embedded into this podcast and onto my YouTube channel because your story needs to be heard. People need to read your books. I have got friends, and I've worked with kids I know who have got excuse me, ADHD.
ADHD.
Yeah. Thank you. So you have to forgive me. I'm dyslexic. So sometimes I look at things and I see it backwards. So thank you. I appreciate it. And I've had to embrace that over the years, knowing my left from my right. Um,
No
but
question.
what you have to offer for some of these kids that I know that suffer through this, and like you said, it's a superpower. I don't even, I'm going to retract that. I'm not even going to say,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely, because it doesn't matter what you have. Use it as your strength and still
Correct.
keep go forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm going to do, Nikki, I'm going to sign all three of these books for you. I'm going to get Scott to make sure he got your information, and we'll send them out right away.
Oh, thank you.
So that you have them. And I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope we stay in touch.
Yes, please. I would love to have you back, especially finish your next book, and then I want to come back and let's talk about your book so we can get that out there. Thank you so much, John, for being with us today. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you're doing. And my gosh, you inspired me. I'm ready to hit the ground running today.
Thanks, Nikki. I appreciate it. Love to be on your show.
Okay. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being with us today. Please reach out to John. Please find all his books. And I encourage you to go to his YouTube channel and his website and please collaborate with him and keep doing what you're doing. Thank you again, John. I will look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Nikki. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.